I'll level with you, Final Fantasy VIII has always been one of my least favourite Final Fantasy entries. There are certainly things I liked about it, but it was always brought down by tedious gameplay mechanics and the early stages being dominated by characters I just didn't like. While the remaster couldn't fix the latter, it certainly made a huge impact on the former, almost going as far as removing the tedious gameplay elements entirely. It might just be the best way to experience Final Fantasy VIII. I don't know if you had the same experience as me growing up, but there always seemed to be this collective downturn on Final Fantasy VIII, even today. It certainly has its lovers, but there is always this air of negativity that surrounds it. This ranges from a mild, it wasn't as good as 7 or 9, to a real intense hatred, and most of the time you won't even hear any specific complaints about it. Sure, there is a lot of negativity surrounding Final Fantasy XIII as well, but you'll immediately be pointed in the direction of it being too linear or having poor storytelling. Some people might give you something specific about Final Fantasy VIII, but mostly it's just a general dislike, and I can't think of many other games like this. Even I fell into this trap. I've always had a pretty negative view of Final Fantasy VIII, but without rattling off a bunch of things from Spoonie's hilarious review back in the day, I wouldn't have been able to tell you why. Final Fantasy VIII is certainly not a bad game, but it can be a very tedious one. For those that don't know, magic in Final Fantasy VIII needs to be drawn from enemies. There are also draw points here and there, but you'll mostly be drawing from enemies. Magic is like a stockable item rather than a learnable skill. You don't really use magic a whole lot in battle though, because it's most useful in the junctioning system. You can essentially equip a stock of magic to one of your stats, and the more you have in the stock, the bigger the bonus to your stats. You can hold up to 100 of each magic, but drawing this many was something most people probably ignored, and the few remaining who did do it hated doing it. Using the draw skill in combat can yield anywhere from 2 to 9 stock of the selected magic. It can also outright fail. The enemies get to freely attack too, requiring you to sustain your party's health, just making this whole process even longer and even more tedious. Later on, if you know what you're doing, you can basically stop drawing magic and more or less craft them, but if you are a new player, there is no way you're going to work that out in any reasonable amount of time without a guide. Add on to this a similar mechanic that relates to everybody's favourite Final Fantasy card game, except mine, Triple Triad. You have the option in combat to card an enemy, which essentially works like Pokemon. You'll need to lower the health of an enemy, then use the card skill on it. If you succeed, the enemy will be captured and turned into a card. Your chances increase to lower the enemy's health. Much like drawing 100 of each magic, carding isn't strictly necessary, but it is tempting, especially early on. See, carding an enemy will almost always result in you getting a card of the exact monster that you carded, but there is a very small chance that you'll get a much rarer and much more powerful card. If you want to play Triple Triad and have any hope of winning early in the game, you're going to need a few of these very rare drops. So how does the remaster fix this? With 2 simple new toggles. The remaster includes 3, I guess you'd call them cheat options. There's a no random encounter mode, a triple speed mode, and a combat buff toggle. The first 2 are self-explanatory, and obviously we have no use for the no encounter mode when drawing or carding, but triple speed is a godsend. The combat buff toggle is the real hero here though. It does a few things, but most importantly, it locks your health to your current maximum, making you invincible, while also maxing your ATB bar. Combat buff and triple speed turns what used to be hours and hours and hours of tedious work into literally minutes. With your ATB bar always full, you can spam the draw skill. With your health always full, there's no need to manage it, and triple speed turns the notoriously lengthy animations into something more than tolerable. The great thing about the combat buff too is that it doesn't increase the damage you deal. In some of the previous re-releases, there was a combat option that allowed you to always deal 9999 damage, but thankfully that isn't the case in this remaster, otherwise you'd have to deal with a different kind of tediousness as you toggled the combat buff on and off to lower an enemy's health for the card skill to work. The buff toggle also comes in handy just in general gameplay, not for battles unless you do really want to just breeze through, but as a simple and quick health restore. You don't need to worry about maintaining a stock of potions and tents, and you don't need to individually select potions or cures for each party member. Just toggle the buff on and off by pressing R3 twice and your party is back at full HP. I know that was quite a long journey for me to talk about 2 little additions to the remaster, but it's my honest opinion that they alone make the remaster the best way to experience Final Fantasy VIII. What about the rest of this so-called remaster though? Well, all of the models have either been upscaled or completely redone, and not just for the party members, most of the NPCs also look significantly better than their old PS1 selves. The music is also of the orchestral or arranged variety rather than the old MIDI sound, but apart from that and the 3 cheat options I mentioned earlier, there isn't a whole lot that was done. The game is still locked to a 4:3 ratio, meaning no widescreen, but I can understand that because the only easy way to get widescreen out of a 4:3 game would be to crop the top and bottom off and zoom in to the correct aspect ratio, which is just horrible. Though I guess including crop and zoom widescreen as an option wouldn't have hurt. The pre-rendered backgrounds are also untouched, and thus are quite a bit blurrier than the new fancy character models. This one is sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing, because people have pointed out that AI upscaling is a thing. I've even done a bit of it myself, but anyone who has done it should be able to tell you that it certainly isn't perfect. If Square did put everything through an AI upscaler, it wouldn't be perfect, people would notice, then complain that Square lazily just put everything through an AI upscaler. The only real way to do it would be to create and render new backgrounds from scratch, and at that point you might as well remake them in a widescreen aspect ratio, and even considering that as an option would put the whole project into the economically unviable bin. They've sort of conditioned us to expect better models with untouched backgrounds anyway. The Final Fantasy IX re-release springs to mind. I guess the problem is though that they called this Final Fantasy VIII Remastered. Recent Final Fantasy IX ports have upgraded character models, an arranged soundtrack, and a bunch of cheat options as well, but it is just called Final Fantasy IX. I certainly wouldn't blame anyone for expecting a little more from something with remastered in the title. I also noticed the quality of the FMV cutscenes to be kind of a mixed bag. The opening movie looks terrible, but some of the other ones actually still look pretty good. And that's about it really. I still don't love Final Fantasy VIII, but that's got more to do with my particular taste in characters. It's worth playing if you haven't before, and I'd also say it's worth playing for those that couldn't deal with the more tedious aspects of it the first time round. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.